I'm AJ Mckenna. I write poetry and I increasingly am also doing like visual art. I draw, I paint a little. Um, yeah, that's the main visual art stuff I tend to do. I do a lot of like mucking about with like image manipulation in Pixlr as well, but I'm not sure. Oh, I did a zine actually, which was like a zine of like a poem I'd written, which I then did illustrations for, which is a format that I'm calling like graphic poems. Like graphic novels are novels that are told in like words and pictures. So I did a zine based on one poem I've done, and I actually have a second one that I have finished all the artwork for, but I haven't actually got as far as publishing it yet. Um, because I need money to pay the printers and I don't have that at the minute.
I really like the concept of a graphic poem, and it's something that we'll come back to in a bit.
Yeah.
But first of all, could you take us through your entry um, to the challenge on the theme of protest, uh,
Okay.
and talk us through the process?
Well, the process for submitting it to the challenge was really just that I thought I may as well submit something. And I happened to, because I've been taking part in the what I tend to refer to as hotel defense actions at the Newbridge Hotel. So, i.e., like showing up to oppose the people who are quote unquote protesting against the people who were in the Newbridge Hotel being there. Um, I don't like using the word protesting to describe what the sort of like far right people in Newcastle are doing to describe that because in my view, it is not a legitimate protest. What they are doing is harassment. They are deliberately showing up there to harass very vulnerable people. So a bunch of people in Newcastle, myself included, have been going up um, every Saturday. I haven't gone this week because of the fact that the weather today is terrible and it's really icy. And I also live somewhere where it's A, quite steep, and B, um, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of like grading that gets done on the paths.
Yeah.
So if we ever get any ice up here, it gets really bad. Um, so I haven't gone out today, but I have been to most of the as I say, I prefer to refer them as hotel defense actions because I don't see what the far right are doing as protesting. I see it as harassment, and I think it's important for people to go up and show the people in the hotel that there are people in the city who do not agree with what the local fesh are doing, and to show solidarity with refugees. And so, one of the things I've been doing is I have been trying to to draw some of the other people who've been on the protests, which has led to some odd sort of like thinking about this because so the image that I submitted that won the group competition for this theme is a picture of someone that appeared on an account that I follow on Instagram called Resistance in Focus, and I originally shared it because I didn't know the identity of the person who that was, and I since have learned they're not someone I think who would be put at risk by having their identity disclosed. Um, but at the same time, I feel like if I say who they actually are, that feels to me like I'm technically doxing someone else who was at a protest. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to actually like, say their name. I mean, that's someone who's quite, quite heavily involved in sort of local protesting and stuff. But I was mainly just so there were a couple of reasons why I wanted to start sketching other people who had been involved in the protests. And one of the reasons, and I should have looked this up before we got interviewed, because the name of the person in question has now completely disappeared from my head. A few years ago, there was an exhibition at the Lang Art Gallery of art to do with the Spanish Civil War.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there was one of the artworks that made a big impression on me was not a particularly detailed piece of artwork. It was I'm wondering if I put them on because I found like some of her pictures and I maybe shared them on my Instagram. So I'm not going to find this, am I? Maybe I should like look this up after we've done this, and then I can just like send a link. But there was an artist who actually was a woman who went to volunteer to actually take part in the Spanish Civil War, and who died while she was there, and they had some of her sketches of other sort of activists that she'd drawn, and I remember thinking that was really cool that she'd been documenting other people that she was part of a movement with. So I thought, as I say, I've only recently started doing visual art. I've been drawing for a little bit over a year now, but more than, I think, maybe a year and a half now. And you're always looking for subjects, things you can use. So I just decided to take some of the photos, as I say, on the Resistance and Focus account and use them as subject matter for drawings. So that was how I wound up submitting the drawing that wound up winning the group competition for this year. So this month, this particular theme. So so that's a very long, rambling answer with probably what is a really awful bit of dead air of me trying to look something up on my phone. And I will probably be continuing to try and look this up on my phone as I try to remember this woman's name, because it's going to really annoy me that I have had an hour to get ready for this interview and I have not thought to just Google that.
Right. So we're both based in the Northeast.
Yes. Yeah.
And I saw that that exhibition at the Lang, and the Northeast has some good connections to the Spanish Civil War as well, because one of the ships supplying aid and also taking some of the international column to Spain set off from Sunderland. So at the last year's Durham Miners Gala, there was a guy there who does some work in Spain, and he's a sculptor, he's a stonemason. So there's a memorial which has got like portholes, and he goes into schools and they draw like what they think should be in the portholes and things, and he's trying to get one commissioned to be in Sunderland as well.
Yeah.
So it was really nice. I got to take part in that. I got to do a little bit of stonemasonry and chisel some stone away for what will hopefully become a bit of a monument, which is nice. I don't think much is made of Britain's involvement in the Spanish Civil War. Or
no, except I think the one time it's really been referred to by a contemporary politician was Hilary Benn using it as a way of trying to drum up support for bombing Syria.
Yeah,
which is a pretty grotesque use of it, really.
Yeah, and the other connection to the Northeast and the Spanish Civil War is George Orwell's second wife, Eileen Blair, who's from South Shields, and she went over with him as well, and played an important part in saving his life there when it all started to fall apart. But Brits did have a large role to play. Socialist Brits and anarchist Brits had a large role to play in the Spanish Civil War and making up the international column, and it's something we should be proud of, especially as leftist creatives. What's the most recent thing you've learned or discovered in the course of creating something?
The most recent thing I've learned or discovered in the course of creating something. So, a relative bought me some charcoal pencils for Christmas, and I've been practicing sketching with those. And it's really interesting, sort of looking at how much more detail you can do in terms of shading with a different material. Like I was literally last night I was sketching something with them, and I was drawing a jacket that someone was wearing, and I noticed that it seemed more three-dimensional because the level of sort of shading and differentiation you can do with charcoal creates it makes the gap between sort of the jacket and the shirt seem more pronounced than if you do that just with graphite. I suppose that's quite a mild sort of thing, but it is literally the most recent thing I've learned from sort of creating stuff.
Yeah, I mean, part of learning is that some things you learn will be the little things, some things you learn will be revelationary, and some of it is very physical and literal, and some things are more abstract. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with learning little bits. They all add up and they all contribute to the art. I think I'd like to take this opportunity to go back to your graphic poem because I have a copy.
Okay.
And I really like it. And as someone who is really enjoying this sort of re-emergence of zines and countercultural pamphlets and things, I really enjoyed it. It's very nicely put together. But there's still, because there's scans of your sketches, of your drawings, some of it feels, and also because of the subject of it, some of it feels very, very visceral still. There's that, because it's...
Well, that I think one of the things that makes that one in particular look very visceral is, and again, this is another sort of like really basic lesson that I probably should have picked up on. The sketchbook that I was doing that graphic poem in is a book that I bound myself. I did a bookbinding course last year as part of a thing that I wanted to do.
Was it at the Lytton Phil?
It was at the Lytton Phil, yes, yeah, and it was kind of like I wanted to do it because I wanted to make and hand bind a pamphlet, and because I thought it would be cool if, because again, I mean, you've mentioned like the rise of the sort of like the rebirth of zines, and I think there is this kind of trend of people returning to sort of more analog forms of producing things, more handmade ways of producing things as a reaction against the way that so much stuff that is like digital is increasingly linked to AI and all that sort of has connected with it, and also through that and interconnected with that is often connected to very grubby political stuff. Like, if you make music and you have music online, most of the platforms that those are going to be on, like Spotify, is horrific. They invest in AI and they invest in like, arms companies and things like that. Um, so it increasingly feels like there is a sort of a move towards wanting to disassociate oneself from that. And I kind of want to, and I actually specifically, the reason I wanted to sort of hand make a pamphlet is because the last couple of books I've self-published have been done through Kindle direct publishing, just because that was the easiest way of doing them. And I have I don't want to like do anything else that gives Jeff Bezos any more money, basically. So I thought, well, if I hand make a pamphlet, I will do so. So I sort of learned how to do this. But the course that I was doing, in order to prove, in theory, all the stuff I needed to know, I could have learned in like an hour. But because I was doing it as part of this course, I had to learn every aspect of bookbinding. So I had to learn how you make the covers, and it was interesting. It was really, in some, a lot of it was quite fun. But I had to create these hardback bound notebooks, and it was one of these notebooks that I sketched what became the author has been tweeting, which is the zine. And when I came to actually scan the pages, I wound up having to remove them from this notebook that I had bound, and it was really hard to remove them because it was like a bound notebook. It wasn't stapled; it was saddle stitched. So, and it was saddle stitched in, like, I think the word is like fascicles, like those, like the little, things of like 16 pages or something that are all separately stitched in. So to do that, I had to basically cut the pages out. And on some of the scans in the zine, you can actually see where the pages were cut. You can actually see the rips and the tears in them, which I do kind of like a little bit. But it's very much sort of like, liking the accent, like I can't remember which track it is, but I think it might be Creep or one of the songs on the Bends. But apparently there is a bit in like a really early Radiohead song where there's like a sound on it that is purely an accident that happened in the studio, and they kept that. So I really like that those rips and stuff come through on the book. But when I came to do the second zine that I've been drawing, I made sure that I was still roughing the sketches out in that sketchbook, but I got a separate like pad with easily removable pages to put the actual final versions on. So that will hopefully look cleaner. But I do still, I do like, I don't want it to look too polished at the same time, because again, looking less polished is actually going to be something that people are going to be striving for more with art, as a way of distinguishing itself from all the highly sort of like produced AI stuff that's out there. Like I was watching a video about AI while I was getting ready for this interview, and one of the things one of the things that was in this video was these like there is this obsession with creating like AI influencers, and like influencers and influence the brain, and like all that sort of stuff is like a whole other thing that I think also has to die. But I think particularly that what I noticed about this was like they're all really beautiful, and they're all designed to look really beautiful, and they're all designed to look really clean and sleek, and they have really nice. They have that way of speaking that is really, really fake. Like you notice this a lot in YouTube videos that are made by people who often are American and who often work in some branch of the media, and there is a sort of affect, like a kind of forced cheerfulness that can come across even in, even in YouTubers that I quite like, like I really like Maggie Mae Fisher's videos, but she does do this kind of like forced cheerfulness that a lot of American comedians who've came through like an improv kind of background develop, and I just think it sort of occurred to me that like maybe what people are going to start doing as a kind of reaction against this to try and not have their stuff be like as co-opted by AI is to try and make stuff that looks and sounds much more ugly. Like, and I don't know what that's necessarily going to look like. I don't know if it means that people are going to like, yeah, the thing that sort of the immediate thing that occurred to me was like, what if people start talking like goblins or something, like just really like like, what was the only way to like distinguish yourself from like one of these fake AI people is to actually deliberately make your voice as grating as possible.
Yeah.
Like we had ASMR voice for like a decade. What if what happens in the next decade is like, you open YouTube and it's someone going, like just.
I would find that very preferable. The other side of that is like people who do like list videos or explainer videos develop this very specific cadence,
Oh God, yeah,
and like
YouTube.
radio, they call it YouTube voice.
Yeah,
You hear, yeah, there's all these specific things like radio voice is very, very
yeah. Well, I
specific,
mean,
and it does get very grating.
for years, poetry voice. Like, uh,
Yeah. Mhm.
I've been doing poetry so long now that I've seen two distinct versions of poetry voice come along, and one of them is kind of still very entrenched. So there was like sort of 1990s, sort of 80s kind of perform
It was
performance
sort of like our version of the slam poets. That
Well,
sort of.
see, slam poetry voice, I think like that was like a second wave of like of poetry voice, because like I remember first coming across like slam poets and being really like impressed because they didn't sound like the this kind of very affected sort of almost not having any emotion in what you're reading, like you just read something, and so like you might, if you were doing like say Tamer and Hawk by like Tom Gunn in like affected, first wave British poetry voice, it would be like, I thought I was so tough, but gentled at your hands, cannot be quick enough to fly for you and show that when I go at your commands. Even in flight above, I am no longer free. I am blind to other birds. The habit of your words has hooded me. As formerly I wheel, I hover and I twist, yet only want the feel in my possessive thought of catcher and of court upon your wrist. You but half civilize, taming me in this way. Through having only eyes for you, I fear to lose. I lose to keep and choose, tamer as prey. And like the whole point is like there's no affect, there's no emotion. You're even trying to hide the rhymes. Like it was
Yeah.
almost like a really kind of like
Like you're slightly embarrassed of it.
yeah, it's like we're really about language here, but we're about language in a really sophisticated way. So we are not going to actually draw attention to the rhymes. The rhymes are there if you want to see them, but really the important thing is that because we are about the language, everything should be in the same affect. And then spoken words or cadence came along, and that was like almost the opposite, because everyone like was suddenly putting so much emotion into their stuff. But then you start to notice stuff like there's loads of like making everything sound like a run-on sentence that suddenly stops in the middle of the next line in spoken word cadence, because everything has like a certain like has like this crashing forward rhythm, and then it suddenly stops and goes in a different direction. And like, and I remember seeing someone, and it's definitely preferable to the first way of doing it. But when you see everyone doing it, you start to think, oh, this is kind of like, this has became a trend. This has became another cage. It's became another thing that people have to try and get themselves out of.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. 'Cause some poetry nights are like amazing variety shows where everyone's completely different, reading it in their own way because everyone feels comfortable and confident. But then you go to some, particularly when it's younger people, students, or
Yeah.
people first getting into it, they do that first wave voice. They pretend
Yes.
they're bored by
Oh,
their own writing as a way
yes.
to sort of protect themselves from what they think will be criticism. But actually, we're all quite lovely at spoken word nights, so they don't
Yeah.
have to worry.
There is, and I think when you're young, there is like maybe because I mean there is students who mainly are doing that, and maybe that is almost a reaction against spoken word cadence.
Yeah.
Like trying to go back to, because I mean there is like a sort of poetry scene of like sort of younger sort of student poets in Newcastle,
Mhm.
that organize things around until fairly recently at a tea shop in Heaton, which has since closed.
Yeah.
And I know they are very sort of consciously looking back to guys like Tom Pickard, for example, and Basil Bunting, and that kind of northern sort of Newcastle-based, particularly, kind of modernism. And I don't know if that is a deliberate kind of attempt to eschew like that earnestness that slam poetry has, or if, as you say, it is just kind of like a defense mechanism that, like, if you seem less, I don't know, poetry's really weird, it's a weird, it's obviously one of the oldest things humans have done artistically, but it's still really strange and odd, and it feels, it always feels weird performing poems anyway, like,
Yeah.
because it's so close to normal speech, like it's so close to what we're doing right now, but it isn't,
Yeah.
and it's close. It has similarities to things like prayer and religious speech and stuff like that, but it's not those either, and it's not singing, and it's like it's a very vulnerable position to be in, because if you sing, you can, there are, you can rely on all kinds of vocal effects to sort of like get your emotional message over to the audience. And if weirdly, having been taking part in these counter protests, like speaking at protests, making speeches is again different from poetry, because it's rhetoric. Poetry isn't rhetoric, which is I think maybe sometimes something that slam poetry cadence kind of is in danger of falling into, of becoming a form of rhetoric. and also, and I don't know if maybe part of the reason for deliberately wanting to bring in that emotional side in the slam poetry cadence is kind of a defense against it just becoming rhetoric, because like I don't know, I'm waffling a bit here.
Yeah, no, I think the slam poetry style, even the modern slam poetry stuff, it's sort of it's closer to theatre. It's like a monologue or a soliloquy. It's that sort of thing. When I talk to people who are in the arts or in other parts of the country, and I tell them that the Northeast has a really good spoken word scene, they're always quite surprised.
Mm.
But in my mind, I think it's probably because, well, these people wouldn't do theatre. I don't think
Yeah.
a lot of these people, they wouldn't do theatre. They're not. That's too big a step. They
Mm.
don't want to sing or busk. But this is the next thing that doesn't require any investment. You don't
This,
need
yeah.
anything. You don't need to spend any money. And then, all right, you've written some poetry on your phone, on your way to and from work every day, which is what I do. And then what do you do
Yeah.
with it? And then there's this sort of nerve-wracking thing where you've got to get on stage for the first time or stand up in front of a load of people for the first time. Yeah.
I do think the phone being the place where we write, and I have written a lot of stuff on my phone, and I've written things I have read off my phone, and I do think that's like, I think because you see people reading at poetry events and they have their phone and they literally just stay looking at the phone the entire time, and I feel like that's a mistake performance-wise, because you're taught, even if you're not like, I mean, there are like, if you hold the phone up and further away, so that allows you to address the audience more. But I think really, like,
Again, it's that sort of defense mechanism, isn't it?
It becomes another defense mechanism, and it becomes a really small space that you're projecting into. If you've got the phone like this and you're looking at it, you're kind of unconsciously, you're just projecting your voice into it. You're not projecting it into the room. And so again, just having it at a different angle can help. But and as I say, I've written things. I mean, I think I did a thing at King Ink that I'd written recently, and I had to read that off my phone. And I always think whenever I'm doing that, that's the mistake. Like, like people always sort of like act as if memorizing poems is like a memory trick.
Mm-hmm.
And like people are always like, oh, it was great that you remembered all those lines. And I always feel like the average part, like Lady Macbeth is a fairly minor part in one of Shakespeare's plays in terms of the number of lines she has. And I think she has something like 126 lines, So an actor playing Lady Macbeth has to remember at least 126 lines. If I'm reading out one of my poems from memory, I think maybe some of my poems are 30 lines long, so that's nowhere near as much. So like, it's not a particularly interesting feat of memorization.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that you do it, the reason you get off book with a poem, is because it allows you to see the audience more clearly. It allows you to vary your performance based on the feedback you can see from the audience. It allows you to vary your eye contact, and it allows you to actually perform the thing rather than just reading it out. And it's like, and obviously, there are different schools of thought about how much one should perform a poem. But I think weirdly, the language in a poem will tell you how much you should perform it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I didn't decide to do Tamer and Hawk there in slam poetry cadence is it's too short to read in that cadence.
Mm-hmm.
It would sound like the first verse of most slam poems, but you do still have to perform it. Rhyme is a guide to performing things. Syllable structure is a guide to performing things. The reason why a lot of Shakespeare's plays are in iambic pentameter is because iambic pentameter seems to fit the rhythm of human breath most simply.
Mm-hmm.
It's like yeah. So I'm kind of on my soapbox there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think in memorizing and therefore performing a poem rather than simply reading it, one, it obviously portrays some vulnerability, but also it's like you're backing your art,
yeah,
and it's really earnest, and I think more people have started to do it. And like you were saying earlier about this return to zines and small print as a reaction to other stuff, people are going to start backing their art a bit more, backing their ideas more. I hope so anyway. I mean, I think about, I'm a photographer, and I think about, upon the advent of photography, how immediately the rest of the art world changed. because
Yeah.
there was no reason to do something hyper realistic anymore, other than a display of your own skill.
Yeah.
And now the only people who are interested in hyper realism are the fascists, basically,
Yes. Yeah.
because anything else that portrays an idea is threatening to them. But everyone else is enjoying sketches and portraying ideas in novel ways. And I think that's trickling down into other stuff. And yeah, you think you're right. I think AI is going to be responsible for a lot of it, or the backlash to AI is going to be responsible for a lot of it.
It's interesting that there seems to be a big interest in like analog photography, and I think that's because like if you take a picture on a phone or on a digital camera, you can just take another picture instantly. And like sorry, I'm getting Discord notifications on here, so I'm just gonna I'm gonna close my Discord down so that stops doing that. Whereas if you're taking a film on if you're photographing something on film, then you basically you get one chance to get the image, and the image that you capture is one particular moment in time caught using, you know, a particular type of film, a particular type of lens. There's so much more sort of choice making, and I actually think this is the thing that I always think is a useful distinction to make. AI can't make choices. AI art is not the result of a human making a series of choices, which is what most artworks actually are. You know, even from like the choice of what particular medium to use, and what particular style to use, to just the little choices that you're making every sort of second as you go through an artwork. AI doesn't make those choices. It just instantly creates some. Well, it doesn't create something. It produces an image, but it's not making any choices. And art is the record of choices made by a human.
And as someone who does a fair bit of photography, I do motorsports photography as part of my job, and that is very much taking pictures, taking 10 photos a second as a car goes speeding past. So I try to make the distinction between taking pictures and making pictures.
Yeah.
Or taking photographs and making photographs. And that analog, you're right, it is a series of choices, but it's also physically slow. And I think that's nice as a reaction to how instant definitely AI is, but also digital photography can be. I mean, all my images, even digital ones, I agonize over in editing. But having a phone in your pocket that can take photos, I think, has given people the wrong impression of what photography is.
Yeah.
Because for most people, the only times they have ever taken photos in their lives has been on their phone, has been, photos of their mates or on a day out or selfies. Whereas if you've studied photography, you'll have a very, very different relationship to the camera and the process of photography. And a lot of people are returning back to physical photography, to film photography, because you can't take as many photos of you as you want. You've got 24 photos on a roll, maybe 36 if you've got a long roll. You've got to really, really think about what you want to take a photograph of. Is this worth it? If it goes wrong, what's it going to look like? I've really got to nail this shot. Or I think there is a way to replicate that in digital photography. So if I go last time I went for a long walk, it took us a couple of hours, and I took a series of photographs on my way. And part of it was, I won't be home in time for my tea. What am I going to stop and take a photo of?
Yeah.
and stop that progress, and think about it that way. So making very deliberate choices, but it's much more natural to make deliberate choices with a film camera where you've got to set everything physically. You're
Yeah.
making that series of choices, and because you have to. Whereas with
Yeah.
digital photography, you don't have to make those choices. You can just snap and be done with it.
I think the phone as well, kind of like, because it's so easy to, like, I mean, on the one hand, I think phones do create a sense of, like, you know, the camera as like a documentary thing
Mhm.
is really easy to access. But equally, phones also allow for stuff like filters
Yeah.
and things. So like, so maybe it is partly to do, like you say, just with the speed of the process, because any kind of analog photography type thing, or any kind of photography where you're playing around with different lenses or whatever, like, again, it forces you to slow down, um, and it forces you to take your time over taking the picture. Whereas with the phone, as you say, you can just take it out. And also, I think with the other thing with film photography is editing something that you have taken. Well, I mean, you can scan it, obviously, but even scanning it is going to take you time, you know. The amount of editing that you can do when you're actually sort of developing a picture is limited, you
Mhm.
know, like, because the other thing, because the phone does make editing way more easy as well, you know. And actually, one of the things that, you know, I think one of the more insidious uses of AI is that I think a lot of things are using it to try and make editing, you know, so that when you take a selfie, it makes you look a bit better and
Mhm.
stuff, you know. Yeah, it's it isn't just AI, and it isn't, but it is a reaction against that kind of convenience, that thing of just instantly producing something. I mean, I think it's a good thing that people are rebelling against that,
Mhm.
and the idea of making things as a more deliberate choice. I mean, you still have the accidents that happen, but if those accidents are happening as a result of a deliberate series of choices you've made, I think they're higher quality accidents than the kind of accidents that an
Yeah.
AI will produce.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, you see this in how people are using online spaces as well. So,
Mhm.
like early internet, the hope was the democratization of information. Everyone was in chat rooms and things like that, sharing what they do, sharing information, and then
Yeah,
it all became very corporate, very sanitized. You're
yeah,
you're being fed the same stuff by big media corporations as you were getting on the telly. Um,
yeah.
and now people are retreating back to Discord servers, like ours.
NeoCities
Yeah,
pages. Yeah,
and again, sharing that expertise. It, I have sort of felt that shift a lot more, where in terms of how people are using the internet actively versus passively. Some of it is
yeah,
still the passive stuff. It's swiping and watching videos in the same way you could do in watching the telly, and some of
yeah.
it is actively engaging in ways that only the internet can facilitate.
It feels like there's a kind of bifurcation going on, where it's going to be like, um there's going to be like an internet of like slop, which honestly is where I see things like TikTok
Yeah,
and probably a lot of social media, like, going into. And then there's still going to be a smaller internet of people actually trying to find things that you can use so, like, I think we I think Wikipedia is probably still going to, like, be around, just despite the fact that Jimmy Wales is forever sort of sending you a message saying that it's about to die if you don't give him £2 now. I think Wikipedia is probably always going to have a place because the internet is actually still quite useful for research if you know how. Like Google is kind of fucked as far as search goes. Although if you actually specifically get it to search web pages, it's less rubbish, because I did this poem in my blog just before Christmas that was like a poem about, at least partly about the nativity, and I was looking for like an unusual like nativity illustration to illustrate the blog with, to have at the top of the entry, because someone told me years ago when I was briefly working like as a deputy editor on like an online magazine someone was running, that that if you have like a photo at the top of an article, people are more likely to continue reading. So I still do that on my blog, like there will be like a photo before I put anything else in there. And I wanted like an unusual like nativity picture. Now looking through Google, if you just put unusual nativity scene into Google, and just even if you don't put images in, but especially if you put images in, it'll just return a load of AI results now. Image searching on Google is really crap. But if you search and you specifically pick search web pages, look for images that actually appear as part of web pages, it will actually like direct you to, like in this instance, pages from museums or art magazines which were showing different things. So I managed to find this painting by this Japanese artist who is weirdly obsessed with making paintings of the nativity. Like he's made loads and loads and loads of pictures of it, which are all in this weird like blocky form of like of the way which again is that's a choice that he's made. He's coming to these things and he's thinking, okay, well, I've done, how am I going to make this look different from the other one? How am I going to draw the figures? How am I going to, so there is going to be like a little like internet of research of people who actually know how to use the internet to research things. And there's going to be like, have you seen, there's this idea called digital gardens that people keep talking about, which I'm quite interested in, which is like people making little websites and just putting little bits of information on them that then eventually turn into articles or something, instead of like the way that you approach things with a blog. Because I'm like really bad at updating my blog, because I've got into this like process where I'm like, the entries almost have to be like essays. Yeah. And like I tried to break out of that last year by thinking I'm just going to try and write an entry for the blog every day, even if it is just literally saying I did this. And I didn't manage to keep that up, because I kept falling back into every entry has to have an essay. It has to have a point. It has to be something I can sum up in a sentence to get people to want to read it. And like, that's a good discipline in a way as a writer, but it's not necessarily great for the quality of your thinking. Whereas this digital gardens idea that you will just have a little like web page with lots of little stuff that's hyperlinked to, because that's the other thing. Like, I feel when the internet was just starting out, there were all these mad ideas about hyperlinks and like how sort of revolutionary they could be, and that just hasn't happened really. The idea of this ultimately cross-referenceable thing hasn't happened.
No.
And I think maybe that might, maybe 20, I mean, because the internet started, I think, in 1985 or something, like, well, not like the modern version of the internet, the HTTP or whatever. Like, maybe it will eventually start to resemble what people thought it might. Well, it won't start to resemble what people thought it might become, because what people thought it might become was like Johnny Mnemonic and nonsense like that. but it might start to become something in itself, other than, as you say, what it is a lot of the time, which is another form of television.
Mhm.
You know, like, and it's actually kind of weird that so much television now, it is like a, most TVs, like if you have like like I was staying at my dad's over Christmas, and he's got like a Virgin TV box, and that has a thing where you can go on apps now. So you
Yeah,
can go on Netflix, you can go on YouTube. So it's like there's this convergence of like media, and yeah, it's converging in that passive area. And I think especially lately, it feels like YouTube. I used to really like YouTube because it was like a hobbyist's medium.
yeah,
And hobbyists, it was like a medium where people would like be producing stuff at a smaller scale, and there's a charm in that. And and I think maybe it's getting harder and harder to do that. um so I don't know. I don't know if I know people who actually are like professional YouTubers and stuff have said that they're all having problems with, it feels like the way the algorithm is working now is really like weighted against people.
mhm,
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously we're having this conversation for something that's going to go on a YouTube channel, and which people are watching on a YouTube channel. But like, yeah, YouTube feels weird. Like, I don't know if you like. I think YouTube, as we understand it, is probably not going to be around in 10 years. It might be like a media thing. Um, and it might be a thing that's got like loads, but I mean, you already have it with stuff like, like the obvious thing that you think of is like Nebula,
mhm.
but Nebula is kind of weird because Nebula kind of sort of is in a symbiotic relationship with YouTube. Like, Nebula effectively uses YouTube to advertise.
Yeah,
So it's not a full, like, it's a budding off from it, but it's not like a full alternative ecosystem. And I think a full ecosystem, but then again, I do think the big thing that's going to happen is people are going to get off the internet. Like, well, not like, I think people are gonna
divest from
just,
the internet.
yes, yeah, people are going to get more into doing things in real life, because I think ultimately, like, I mean, the internet is going to become less reliable. Like,
Mhm.
talking about phones having created this kind of like spread of like documentary photography and filmmaking on like a massive level, but now you have AI coming along, and that's going to make that like less tenable.
Mhm.
Like, my conspiracy theory about AI is that it's always been there so that people have deniability if video of like cops doing things, shooting people, or like politicians engaging in wrongdoing comes out. But even if that's just me being paranoid, it does mean that every video you look at, you can't trust that it's real. And like, you're already like, the adverts on YouTube are an absolute nightmare of just these uncanny valley things that look like people trying to sell you stuff. And some of them may be actual people who have made themselves, edited themselves to a point where they are indistinguishable from animation at this point. And like, I think the only way to be absolutely certain that something is real is to encounter it in the actual real world. And I think that is going to be what people are going to be interested in the next 10 years, I think. But I could be wrong.
Let's go back to the question. Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
go back to some of the questions. No,
Um,
I'm getting just as distracted. I'm
we
really
had
enjoying
we had
this.
a bit of technical difficulties, by the way, which did allow me to look up that the artist that I was talking about was Felicia Brown, who was the only woman to die, the only British woman to die in the Spanish Civil War. Um, yeah, so people should look her up because she's really good. Her drawings are really good. She made some paintings which are really really good as well. Obviously, didn't get to make as many as she could have because of her untimely death, but like, just a really inspiring example of like a committed artist. So yeah.
What's the best advice about creativity that you've heard?
Oh God. I think I can't think of a specific piece of it. I don't know if I mentioned this when the last time I did an interview for this channel, but I don't know if it necessarily counts as advice per se, but there's I think generally speaking, I really like the work of John Berger, like John Berger's essays, and I read a book of his early art criticism called Permanent Red that came out from Verso this year, and there's a bit in it where he talks about how everything he's done has been to. I can't find the actual quote because I lent the book to a friend and they haven't given it back to me yet. But he has this line about how evil bourgeois morality is, and how everything that he has done as an artist and as an art critic is dedicated to destroying the system of bourgeois morality, which is great in its own. But he has this line about how poets are in a kind of prayerful relationship with language, that's what you're, that whatever kind of poem you're writing, it is in some way a prayer to language itself. And I think maybe that applies across arts, that to some degree, whatever, like when you're drawing, when you're making an image, there is some element of that is a declaration of faith in the idea of making an image, in the whether that's to create a quote unquote realistic depiction of the world, or a depiction of the world as it appears to you. You're making a declaration that you think the thing that you're drawing is something worth drawing, and that's always been something, certainly with regard to writing, that's always something that's in the back of my mind when I write something, that if I'm writing something, whatever it is I'm writing about, there is a kind of assumption in there that this is a thought that is worth putting into words. And again, that's not something an AI can do. An AI cannot evaluate. AIs don't make linguistic decisions. They literally don't think. So they can't have a thought that is worth putting into words, and they can't try to decide whether or not something is worth putting into words. But that quote from Berger comes from this much longer thing that he wrote, where he talks about language as being something, poetry in particular, as being something that crosses the battlefield. So it ministers to the wounded, and I guess maybe that brings us to a really obvious bit of advice, and something that I do think about a lot, and something which I think is relevant with a lot of art that is being produced lately, which is that Bertolt Brecht thing. Actually, a couple of Bertolt Brecht things could count as the best piece of advice I've heard about creativity. Art is not a mirror, art is a hammer, which I've always liked. But the main thing is that art should comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I definitely do think about that a lot when I'm writing things. I don't want to write stuff or even draw stuff that is just going to make people feel better. Feel like people who are doing horrific things to other people and to the planet. I don't want them to feel comfortable with anything that I produce. So yeah. So again, I would quite like to draw something deliberately ugly rather than draw something pretty, just because I think it's more, it's more likely to get a reaction from the type of person that from the comfortable, like I'm not making things for comfortable people, and I don't think as an artist anyone should make things for comfortable people. Yeah, so the short answer to that question is that Bertolt Brecht quote: "Art should comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable." But we got there by a random ramble around John, and generally actually read John Berger, because John Berger is really good. But I probably said that in the last interview as well.
Is there a creative art or field you'd like to try, or looking forward to trying soon?
Oh God, I'd like to paint more. I don't. I started drawing because I started doing a painting course, and I sort of drifted out of actually making stuff with paint because I kind of moved house, and since I moved into a new place, it's been harder to find time to actually paint and stuff. So yeah, I would actually, because I don't like I'm pretty good at drawing, I think. I'm not as good with paint, because paint's completely different. It's like, with a pencil, you have a point, you have a tool that makes marks, you can erase much more easily. Not as much with charcoal. I'm learning actually charcoal doesn't erase as easily, so that's but with paint, it's like viscous, and so much depends on the position, the type of brush you're using, and like, so I can make kind of like, I can like, I'm not interested in like necessarily drawing stuff that is realistic, but I think it's much easier for me to make something that I've drawn look like a series of deliberate choices in drawing whatever it is that I'm actually drawing. Whereas if I paint, what I tend to wind up making choices about is like I'm much more interested in like just the paint itself. Like my painting is much more abstract, and while a lot of that is, and I think a lot of the reason it's more abstract is because I'm not as skilled at doing it. So I would like to actually get better at doing it, so that I can definitely say that if I do something abstract, it is more of a choice. But I don't know if I'll ever have the time to get there, but I would like to try.
I've got some quick fire questions here
Cool.
to finish us off. So the beach or the woods?
The woods, definitely.
Pool or darts?
Oh, pool.
Nice. What is the best breakfast cereal?
What is the best breakfast cereal? So the best breakfast cereal is definitely Crunchy Nut cornflakes.
Sci-fi or fantasy?
Sci-fi. And I've been reading a lot more sci-fi this year, actually, which has been good. Last year, I should say. Obviously, I've not read any sci-fi this year because it's only 3 days in. The only book I've actually read was rereading Suleiman Adonia's The Seers, which is literary fiction, but it is really good and people should read it. Yeah.
Do you have a New Year's resolution?
Not really. No.
Fair enough.
I think sorry. You always break them anyway. So what is the point? That's another thing to feel guilty about.
What's the best takeaway?
Ooh, it depends. That's the only answer I can give, because it depends on where you are, like what. Yeah, that's it depends. It's too complicated a question to just answer.
My answer for that is just the tandoori at the bottom of my street. mostly because it's at
Yeah.
the bottom of my street.
Well, yeah, this is, I mean, my initial thought as an answer to that is like, on very, very strict grounds, the objectively best takeaway is cheesy chips from
Mhm.
anywhere. Because if you get a takeaway, what you want is you want something which is very greasy, you want something with a lot of carbs, but you also want some protein in. And ideally, you don't want to spend too much on it. And usually, cheesy chips is the best protein to carb ratio to cost ratio that you can have. But obviously, you aren't going to want to get cheesy chips every time you go to a takeaway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What is the best Star Trek?
Oh, God. Um, Deep Space Nine.
So
That's not
many
even
people
a
say
difficult
Deep Space
question,
Nine.
actually.
I'm still fighting for the next generation to overtake them in the rankings of the
No,
votings.
Deep,
Steve can
Deep
put
Space
up
Nine
a
is so much better. It's like Next Gen is good. There's a lot of stuff that's good in Next Gen, but I think Deep Space Nine has like a huge amount of influence on later sci-fi shows.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, obviously, the really smart answer is Babylon 5, but like, aside from not being part of the Trek franchise, characterization is not really one of J. Michael Straczynski's strengths, you know? So
Mhm.
like plotting is, but yeah. Also like season 5 of that show is a train wreck. And it doesn't help that one of the best episodes of it was written by fucking Neil Gaiman. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Like
Cool. Where can people find you and your art?
so I'm on Instagram as Anathema McKenna. So that's where I post a lot of my drawings. I have a blog which is called Wrestling Emily Dickinson, which is an obscure joke about like an obscure film and about the fact that I mainly really like Emily Dickinson, and about at the time that when I started writing it, I was really, really introverted, and had a lot of like social anxiety. Um, so that's on Blogspot. I think if you Google A J Mckenna, you've probably got a reasonably good chance of finding me. The only other, there is another famous A J Mckenna who used to be a college football quarterback and who now is like an American football coach in America. But there will probably be one or two subtle clues that you found him rather than me. So don't get confused.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to
Okay,
say?
cheers. No, I hope this interview is of some use. I hope I've not rambled too much, and made it difficult in terms of editing. One thing I would like to say is, having started out by talking about the fact that it doesn't seem like the government is going to do anything to stop fascists harassing asylum seekers who are in hotel accommodation in the UK. So it is really important for people to turn out to protest against the fascists doing that, to defend the people in those hotels. Those things tend to happen on Saturdays. The fascists always turn up on Saturdays, so that's when we turn up in Newcastle, which is the local one. Those protests usually happen at about 11:30 outside of the Newbridge Hotel every Saturday. We could always use more people to come along to that to show that people in Newcastle do not support fascists there. I know that York has a similar situation because the poet Henry Raby is involved with their sort of hotel defense actions, and wherever people around the country are who will be watching this, there is probably a hotel in your area ran by one of three massive companies which are making a huge profit, none of which is being seen by the people they have in those hotels, who are being kept in appalling conditions and being fed absolutely appalling food, despite whatever propaganda you may have heard. There is probably a hotel in your city that is being used to house asylum seekers, and every Saturday there are probably a bunch of racists who are rocking up outside it with a load of flags to harass the people in it. And wherever you are in the country, there will be a group that is dedicated to opposing those racists and standing between them and the people they want to harass. And I think it is a very good use of one's Saturday to go down and to oppose that. So I would really like it if people watching this video would go out and do that, even if you just do it once. You know, just show up one Saturday. Please do. The more people we have, so we can show that these fascists are not the real face of our cities, the better. So that's the soapbox bit again.
Yeah, the best thing you can do with fascists is embarrass them. And
Yes,
the best way
exactly.
to embarrass them is to outnumber them.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also the best, literally just embarrass them with sheer weight of numbers. If they see that there are not enough people, if they see that they're outnumbered, I mean, like, and people will come out for like a big thing. Like, so for example, in Newcastle in September, we had a really massive anti-fascist mobilization against plans by fascists to march through the towns. If we could get even a tenth of those numbers just down to the regular hotel defense, it would totally dwarf the number of fascists who turn up, and it would completely demoralize them. And the visual alone would be just fantastic, just for the people in the hotel looking out to see on one side a bunch of idiots with flags, and on the other side like a massive wall of people supporting them. You might one day be in a situation where you have to flee this country the way things are going, and you might have to seek asylum in another country. And so what I would say to people watching is just, if you were in a hotel like that, you would want to look out and you would want to see a wall of people supporting you. Well, you have a situation where you can come down and you can be that wall. So go down and be that wall.
Cool. Thank you very much.
That's me speechifying.